The lights inside the orbital station burned bright and cold. Lyra walked 3 steps behind Governor Vex, her bare feet silent on the polished metal floor. The collar around her neck hummed with a dull, constant ache. She had worn it for so long that she barely remembered what it felt like to exist without pain. Her skin should have glowed with soft blue and silver light. That was the natural way of the Kier people. But the collar kept those lights dim, kept everything about her dim and small. She was supposed to be invisible, unless someone wanted to see her. She was supposed to be nothing, unless someone wanted to use her. Tonight was another party. Governor Vex loved parties. He loved showing off his wealth, his power, and his possessions. Lyra was one of those possessions. She was the rarest kind, because empathic slaves were hard to find these days. Most of the Kier had already been captured and sold across the Valerian Empire, the grand hall filled with guests. Valerians towered over most other species, their scaled skin shimmering in shades of green and gold. They laughed too loud and drank too much. Lyra stood in her designated corner, hands folded, eyes down, waiting. "Come here, pet," Vex called. His voice cut through the music and conversation. Every part of Lyra wanted to run, but her legs carried her forward. They always did. Vex grabbed her wrist and pulled her to the center of the room. "Watch this," he told his guests. "This little thing can make you feel whatever I want." He pressed a control on his wrist device. The collar around Lyra's neck sent a sharp command into her nervous system. Her empathic abilities, usually locked away, suddenly burst outward against her will. She broadcast waves of euphoria to everyone in the room. The guests gasped and laughed, their pupils dilating with artificial pleasure. Lyra felt all of it. She felt their joy, but she also felt what lay beneath: greed, lust, cruelty, boredom. Her gift meant she experienced not just her own emotions, but everyone else's too. The collar forced her to share feelings she did not have, to make others happy while she suffered. When Vex finally released the control, Lyra collapsed to her knees. Her head pounded. Her chest felt hollow. The guests applauded. "Remarkable," one of them said. "Where did you acquire her?" "A raid on one of the outer Kier colonies," Vex replied, sipping his drink. 15 years ago. Got her young enough to train properly. 15 years. Lyra had been 5 years old when the Valerian ships came to her world. She barely remembered her mother's face. She remembered screaming. She remembered the moment the first collar closed around her neck, and everything bright. Inside her went dark. The party continued for hours. Lyra was used 4 more times that night. Each time, the collar forced her abilities out, made her broadcast emotions that were not hers. Each time, she felt herself breaking a little more. When the guests finally left, Vex dismissed her with a wave. She walked through the empty corridors to the servants' quarters. Other slaves moved in the shadows. Most were not Kier. They were other species the Valerians had conquered. No one spoke. Speaking without permission earned punishment. Lyra entered her small room. It had a sleeping mat, a water dispenser, and nothing else. She lay down and stared at the ceiling. The collar continued its constant hum against her throat. Sometimes she dreamed of what it might feel like to touch her own skin and feel only her own emotions. Just her own. Nothing else. The next morning began like every other. Lyra was awakened before dawn, fed a nutrition paste, and sent to the grooming chambers. Servants cleaned her, styled her hair, and painted her skin to hide the scars. The Valerians liked their slaves to look perfect. By mid-morning, she was stationed outside Vex's office. She stood there for 6 hours, not moving, barely breathing. This was her purpose: to be available, to be ready, to be nothing. She watched ships come and go through the massive windows. The station orbited above the Valerian capital world. From here, she could see 3 moons and the constant traffic of vessels bringing goods from across the Empire. So much freedom out there. So much space. And she was trapped in invisible chains. A small cargo ship docked in Bay 17. Lyra noticed it only because the pilot looked different from the usual Valerian crews. He was human. Humans were rare this far into Valerian space. They were a young species, barely a century into galactic society. Most older species considered them reckless and strange. The human pilot walked past, carrying a cargo manifest pad. He wore simple work clothes and had dark hair that fell into his eyes. For just a moment, his gaze swept across the corridor and landed on Lyra. Their eyes met. It lasted less than a second. Then he looked away and kept walking. But in that fraction of time, Lyra felt something she had not felt in years. Recognition, not as a thing or a tool or a possession, but as a person. Her hands trembled. She forced them still. That evening, Vex was in a foul mood. One of his political rivals had been promoted. He took his anger out on Lyra. When she was too slow bringing him his drink, he activated the collar's pain setting. Lightning crawled through her nerves. She bit her tongue to keep from screaming. Screaming only made it last longer, but the worst part was not the pain. The worst part was feeling Vex's pleasure at causing it. His satisfaction leaked into her empathic senses. She experienced his cruelty from both sides, the victim and the victimizer. It made her want to disappear entirely. When he finally tired of punishing her, he sent her away. Lyra returned to her room and pressed her back against the wall. The pain faded, but the memory of it remained. The memory of Vex's twisted joy remained. She closed her eyes and thought of the human pilot. The way he had looked at her. Just for a second. Like she was real. It was dangerous to hope. Hope had been beaten out of her years ago. Every time someone showed her a moment of kindness, it was taken away. Better to feel nothing. Safer to be empty. But some small part of her, buried deep where the collar could not quite reach, remembered that look. And despite everything, despite all her training and fear and pain, that small part whispered a single word. Please. Somewhere else on the station. The human pilot sat in his ship and could not stop thinking about the girl with the dim lights in her skin and the collar around her neck. He had seen many things in his years, hauling cargo across the galaxy. But he had never seen eyes that desperate. His name was Hyan, and he was about to make a very stupid decision. Hyan could not sleep. He lay in his bunk aboard his cargo ship, staring at the curved metal ceiling. The station's docking bay was quiet at this hour. Most crews were either asleep or drinking in the station bars. But his mind would not stop replaying that moment in the corridor. The girl with the collar. The absolute emptiness in her eyes, except for that one flash of something deeper. Something human, though she was not human at all. "You're thinking too loud," Nari said from the bunk above him. His co-pilot and oldest friend had known him since they were children in the academy. She could read him better than anyone. "I saw something today," Hyan said. "I know. You've been weird since we docked." Nari swung down from her bunk and sat across from him. Her hair was pulled back in a messy knot. "What is it?" Hyan told her about the girl, about the collar, about the look. Nari was quiet for a long moment. Then she sighed. "Hyan, no. I didn't say anything. You didn't have to. I know that tone." She leaned forward. "This is Valerian space. They have laws here we don't agree with. But they're not our laws to change. She's a person, Nari. And we're barely tolerated here as it is. Humans are new. We're small. If we start causing trouble, they'll ban us from half the trade routes in this sector." Nari's voice was gentle but firm. "I know it's wrong. But we can't save everyone. Hyan looked at his hands. They were calloused from years of loading cargo, fixing ship systems, doing the work that kept them flying. What's the point of having principles if we ignore them when they're inconvenient? The point is staying alive long enough to make a difference somewhere we actually can. But even as she said it, Nari knew it would not be enough. Hyan had always been this way, stubborn, idealistic, unable to walk past suffering without trying to help. It had gotten them in trouble before. It would probably get them in trouble again. The next day, Hyan stayed on the station longer than necessary. He told Nari he was checking for additional cargo contracts. That was partially true. But mostly, he was researching. The station's public database had limited information on the Kier species. They were listed as a servant class. Empathic abilities. Docile temperament. Ideal for domestic and entertainment purposes. The entry read like a product description. Hyan dug deeper, accessing historical records through a back channel he had paid good money to acquire. What he found made his stomach turn. The Kier had not always been slaves. 70 years ago, they had been a free people living on a cluster of peaceful worlds. They had no weapons, no military. Their empathic nature made them incapable of violence. When the Valerian Empire expanded into their territory, the Kier tried to negotiate. They tried to share their culture, to find common ground. The Valerians took their empathy and turned it into a weapon. They invented the callers, devices that could force the Kier to broadcast emotions on command, to feel the pain of others, to experience torture from both sides. The perfect slaves, because their own nature prevented them from fighting back. The historical records called it annexation and integration. Hyan called it what it was: genocide, cultural destruction, slavery. He found technical schematics for the callers. They were not just restraints. They caused constant low-level pain. They suppressed the Kier's natural bioluminescence, and they could be set to deliver agony with the press of a button. Hyan sat back in the station's public terminal booth. His hands shook with anger. A message notification appeared on his personal device. It was from Doyon, a lawyer he had met years ago during a trade dispute on Earth. Doyon specialized in interspecies law and had connections throughout the galactic legal community. Hyan sent him an encrypted package. Everything he had found. Images of the girl. Caller specifications. Historical records. Doyon's response came 3 hours later. This is horrific, but legally complicated. Valerian sovereignty laws protect their internal practices. We'd need a victim willing to testify and physical evidence. Even then, it's a long shot. Hyan read the message twice. Then he made his decision. Over the next week, Hyan took extra delivery contracts to the station. Nari watched him with growing concern but said nothing. She knew that look. He was planning something. Hyan mapped the station's layout. He memorized shift changes. He learned which corridors had cameras and which did not. He observed Governor Vex's routines. The Valerian kept a predictable schedule, which made sense for someone so arrogant. He did not expect trouble in his own territory. On his 5th visit, Hyan manufactured a reason to deliver supplies near Vex's residential section. He timed it perfectly. The guards were changing shifts. Vex was in a meeting, and the girl was standing in her usual spot outside the office doors. Hyan walked past her slowly. His heart pounded so hard, he thought everyone must hear it. When he was close enough, he spoke quietly without looking at her. My name is Hyan. I'm going to help you. He kept walking, did not pause, did not look back. But from the corner of his eye, he saw her hands twitch, saw the tiny shift in her posture. She had heard him. That night, Nari confronted him in the ship's galley. You spoke to her, didn't you? Hyan did not lie to his friends. Yes, Hyan, this is insane. You can't rescue her. The security on this station is military grade. And even if you somehow got her out, where would you go? The Valerians would hunt you across the galaxy. Then I'll be hunted. He met her eyes. I can't leave her there, Nari. I can't know what I know and do nothing. You'll get yourself killed. You'll get me killed. You'll ruin everything we've built. I know. His voice was quiet. I'm not asking you to come with me, but I am doing this. Nari stared at him for a long moment. Then she swore, long and colorfully in 3 languages. You're the most stubborn human I've ever met. I know that too. Fine. She threw up her hands. Fine. If you're going to do something this stupid, you need help. Real help. Not just your idealistic nonsense. She pulled up a contact on her communication device. I have a friend, Taiyang. He used to be military. Now he works deep space mining, but he has access to equipment. The kind of equipment that isn't strictly legal. Hyan felt hope flutter in his chest. You're helping me? I'm making sure you don't die like an idiot. Nari's voice was sharp, but her eyes were soft. Someone has to keep you alive. Might as well be me. They contacted Taiyang that night. He listened to the plan, asked pointed questions, and then laughed. You want to break into a Valerian high-security station and steal the governor's personal slave? That's the dumbest thing I've heard in years. So you won't help? Hyan asked. I didn't say that. I just wanted to make sure you knew how dumb it was. Taiyang's grin was audible through the communication link. I'm in. I've got some gear that might work. And honestly, I've been bored with mining asteroids. Over the next several days, they planned. Taiyang arrived on the station with equipment hidden in mining supply crates. Hyan continued his delivery routes, gathering more intelligence. Nari worked on escape trajectories and backup plans. And in her small room, Lyra lay awake and thought about the human who had spoken her name. No one had spoken to her like a person in 15 years. Part of her believed it was a dream. Part of her believed it was a cruel trick, but a deeper part, the part that still remembered freedom, dared to hope. The night before the planned rescue, Hyan recorded a message for his family on Earth, just in case. He told them he loved them. He told them he was doing something important. He did not tell them what. Nari found him in the cockpit. Last chance to back out. I'm not backing out. She nodded. Good, because I already moved the ship to the emergency bay. If we're doing this, we're doing it right. Hyan smiled. Thank you. Thank me if we survive. But Nari smiled back. Tomorrow, everything would change. For better or worse, the stubborn human was going to keep his promise. The gala was everything Governor Vex loved. Bright lights, expensive music, and powerful people pretending to enjoy each other's company. The orbital station's grand hall had been transformed into a display of Valerian excess. Ice sculptures melted slowly under golden lamps. Servants carried trays of delicacies from a dozen conquered worlds. Lyra stood in her designated corner, wearing the dress Vex's attendants had forced on her. It was beautiful, and she hated it. Beauty was another cage. Another way to be looked at, had not seen Dot. The collar hummed against her throat. Tonight it felt heavier than usual. Or maybe she was just tired of carrying it. Somewhere in the lower levels of the station, Hyan pulled on a stolen maintenance uniform. The badge was a forgery, courtesy of Taiyang's military contacts. It would hold up to casual inspection, but not a deep scan. He had maybe 2 hours before someone noticed. Comes check. Taiyang's voice crackled in his earpiece. I hear you, Hyan whispered. Nari's got the ship ready. I'm in the system hub. Security feeds are about to get very confused. There was a pause. You sure about this? No, Hyan admitted. But I'm doing it anyway. He stepped into the corridor and became just another worker. Head down, confident stride, like he belonged there. The key to infiltration was not invisibility. It was looking like you had every right to be exactly where you were. The Gala had pulled most of the security to the upper levels. Vex wanted to show off his protection detail to the visiting dignitaries. That left the service corridors less guarded than usual. Hyan moved through them quickly, following the map he had memorized in the maintenance tunnels. He found who he was looking for. Yuna was an older Kier woman who worked in the station's waste management systems. Hyan had learned about her through careful observation. She was one of the few Kier who still remembered freedom, who had been an adult when the Valerians came. She looked up as Hyan approached. Her eyes were the same dim silver as Lyra's. The collar around her neck was older, more scarred from years of wear. "Human," she said quietly. "You should not be here. I need your help." Hyan spoke quickly. "I'm getting someone out tonight. One of your people. But I need information about the callers." Yuna studied him for a long moment. "Why would you help us?" "Your kind stood by when we were taken. Everyone stood by. I know. And I'm sorry. But I can't fix the past. I can only try to do better now." He met her gaze steadily. "Please, tell me how the callers work." Something shifted in Yuna's expression. Maybe hope. Maybe just exhaustion. "They are linked to a central control node. In the security hub, sublevel 3. If you could disable it, every caller on this station would deactivate." Hyan's breath caught. "Every caller?" "Yes, but it would trigger an immediate lockdown. Everyone would know, and you would have minutes at most before they restored the system." He thought fast. That changed everything. Instead of rescuing one person, he could free hundreds. But it also meant hundreds of people trying to escape at once. Chaos, danger, risk. "Tell the others," Hyan said. "Tell them to be ready. When the collars shut off, run. Get to the docking bays however you can." Yuna grabbed his arm. Her grip was surprisingly strong. "If you fail, they will kill you. They will make it slow. And I won't fail." He tried to sound more confident than he felt. He left her and continued toward the upper levels. His heart hammered. The plan had just gotten much more complicated. But also much more important. Taiyang's voice came through the earpiece. "I've got eyes on the control node. It's guarded, but I can create a distraction. You'll have maybe 90 seconds. What kind of distraction?" "The fun kind. Fire suppression system malfunction. Very loud, very wet, very confusing." Taiyang sounded entirely too pleased with himself. Hyan reached the level where the gala was being held. He could hear the music, the laughter. He slipped into a service entrance and began making his way toward Vex's private quarters. According to the schedule he had memorized, the governor would be schmoozing dignitaries for another hour. That was when everything went wrong. Vex appeared in the corridor ahead, walking toward his quarters with an assistant. He was early. He was never early. Hyan's mind raced. He could not turn back without looking suspicious. Could not hide. Could only keep walking and hope the fake credentials held. He passed Vex with his head down, muttering something about a maintenance request. The governor barely glanced at him. Hyan made it 10 steps before he heard, "You stop." He stopped, turned slowly. Vex was staring at him with narrowed eyes. "I've seen you before." "The cargo pilot." "Yes, sir. I took a maintenance shift for extra pay." The lie came smoothly. Trying to save up. Humans. Vex sneered. Always scrambling for scraps. "What are you doing on this level?" "Environmental control malfunction report. Sublevel access panel." Hyan held up a datapad with false work orders. Vex studied him for another long moment, then waved him away dismissively. Get it done and get out. I don't want to see you again. Hyan walked away, forcing himself not to run. His hands were shaking. That was too close, Taiyang said in his ear. Tell me about it. Hyan reached the sublevel access and changed direction. He had to move now, before Vex decided to check his credentials. He reached Vex's private quarters. The door was locked with biometric security. But Taiyang had planned for this. Uploading bypass code, Taiyang said. Hold the datapad to the scanner. Hyan did. The door hissed open. Inside, Lyra sat on a small chair, still wearing her gala dress. She had been returned here to wait until Vex wanted her again. When she saw Hyan, her eyes went wide. We don't have much time, Hyan said quickly. Do you trust me? She stood slowly. Her voice was rough from disuse. Why are you doing this? Because it's right. Because you deserve freedom. Because I promised. He held out his hand. Will you come with me? Lyra looked at his hand, at his face. For 15 years, every hand extended to her had brought pain. Every promise had been broken, but this human's eyes held something she had almost forgotten. Sincerity, kindness, hope. She took his hand. The moment their skin touched, her empathic sense flared. She felt his emotions. Fear, yes, but also determination like iron. Compassion like sunlight. And underneath it all, a fierce protective anger at what had been done to her god. It nearly broke her. She had not felt emotions this genuine in so long. Taiyang, we have the package, Hyan said. Start the distraction. Somewhere in the station systems, Taiyang executed his code. Alarms blared. Fire suppression systems activated across 3 levels. Water and foam poured from ceiling vents. People shouted in confusion. In the chaos, Hyun and Lyra ran. They made it to sublevel 3. The security hub was in disarray, guards rushing to respond to the apparent emergency. Taiyang's distraction was working perfectly. Hyan found the control node. It was a large panel covered in alien script and blinking lights. Taiyang, I'm here. Walk me through it. Third panel from the left. Red crystal housing. You need to physically destroy it. Hyan grabbed a maintenance tool from his belt and swung hard. The crystal shattered. Sparks flew. Across the entire station, every single collar deactivated simultaneously. Lyra gasped as the constant pain she had lived with for 15 years simply stopped. The suppression on her abilities lifted. Light burst across her skin in brilliant blues and silvers. She could feel again. Not just others' emotions forced through the color, but her own natural empathic sense. It was overwhelming. Beautiful. Terrifying. Around the station. Hundreds of Kier felt the same thing. Freedom. Real. Physical freedom. And they ran. Alarms of a different kind began to sound. Security realized what had happened. Lockdown protocols initiated. But it was too late. The freed slaves were already moving. Hyan grabbed Lyra's hand again. We have to go. Now. They ran through corridors filling with chaos. Freed Kier fled in every direction. Guards tried to respond, but were overwhelmed by the sheer numbers. And the Kier, now able to sense emotions fully, could feel where danger waited and avoid it, and found them in a junction corridor. She had gathered 17 others. This way, she said. I know the service tunnels. They ran together. Behind them, weapons fire echoed. Some guards were shooting. Some freed slaves were falling, but many more were escaping. Hyan's ship was docked in Bay 12. Nari had the engines running hot. She shouted when she saw the crowd. You said one person. Plans changed. Hyan yelled back. They piled into the cargo ship. It was not designed for passengers. But right now, that did not matter. Nari worked the controls. The docking clamps released. A Valerian security ship moved to block them. Nari fired the maneuvering thrusters, spinning their vessel in a way that should have been impossible for something that size. She had always been the better pilot. They shot out of the docking bay into open space. Behind them, the station erupted in chaos. Other freed Kier were stealing ships, fighting for escape pods, doing anything to get away. Lyra stood in the cargo hold, her skin glowing with natural light for the first time in 15 years. She could feel the emotions of everyone on the ship. Hyan's exhausted relief. Nari's terrified exhilaration. The other Kier's overwhelming hope and fear and joy. She reached out and found Hyan's hand in the chaos. He squeezed back. They were not safe yet. But they were free. And that was worth everything. The cargo ship shuddered as another blast hit the shields. Nari cursed and threw the vessel into a sharp dive, using the planet's gravity well to gain speed. 3 Valerian security ships pursued them, their weapon systems far more advanced than anything a civilian cargo hauler should survive. "Shields at 40%, Nari shouted. "We can't take much more of this." In the cargo hold, Lyra and the other freed Kier held on to whatever they could find. Their fear washed over Lyra in waves, mixing with her own. For so long, her empathic abilities had been used as a weapon against her. Now she felt them fully, naturally, and it was almost too much. 17 different emotional signatures, all strong and chaotic. Hyan worked frantically at a communications panel. "Taiyang, please tell me you got the files uploaded." "Sent everything to your lawyer friend 5 minutes ago." Taiyang responded through the static-filled link. "And I forwarded it to someone else, too. A journalist. Name's Minji. She works for the Galactic Council News Network." "You what?" Hyan braced himself as the ship lurched again. "Trust me. If we're going to cause an incident, might as well make it a big one." Another blast rocked the ship. Warning lights flared across the cockpit. Nari's hands flew over the controls. "I can't shake them. They're faster and better armed." Lyra stumbled forward from the cargo hold, using the walls for support. "There's a debris field. I can feel the pilot's intentions. He doesn't want to follow us through it." "How can you possibly know that?" Nari demanded. "I can sense his fear. He's afraid of damaging his ship." Lyra pointed. "There, that direction." Nari looked at Hyan. He nodded. She trusted him, and apparently he trusted the strange glowing alien girl. She aimed the ship toward the debris field ahead, remnants of some ancient battle or destroyed station. The cargo ship dove into the maze of twisted metal and frozen rock. Nari's piloting skills were tested to their absolute limit. She wove between obstacles that loomed out of the darkness. Behind them, one Valerian ship tried to follow. It clipped a large piece of debris and spun away, venting atmosphere. The other 2 ships held back, just as Lyra had predicted. They emerged from the debris field badly shaken but alive. Nari set a course for the nearest neutral space station and engaged the faster-than-light drive. The stars stretched, and they vanished from Valerian territory. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Yuna started laughing. It was a strange, broken sound, like she had forgotten how. Soon other Kier joined in. Tears and laughter mixed together. They were free. Actually free. On Earth, in a small apartment in the city of Seoul, Yun opened an encrypted file, and his face went pale. He had handled many cases of injustice in his career as an interspecies rights lawyer, but the images and data in this file made his hands shake. Detailed technical specifications of the torture callers. Medical scans showing the permanent damage they caused. Video footage of Kier slaves being displayed, used, punished. Historical records proving the Kier had been a free people before their genocide, and witness testimony. Not just written accounts, but biometric data proving the testimonies were given under empathic truth sense. Impossible to fake, Doyan immediately began drafting legal documents. This was bigger than one rescue. This was evidence of systematic crimes against an entire species. The kind of evidence that could bring down governments. Across the galaxy, on the Galactic Council's main station, journalist Minji received the same files. She was young for someone in her position, ambitious and hungry for stories that mattered. Most galactic news was boring political maneuvering. But this was something else. She started making calls. Within hours, she had verified the sources. The metadata on the files was authentic. The biometric data was real. This was not a hoax or propaganda. Minji scheduled an emergency broadcast. The kind that interrupted regular programming across 100 worlds. Her report went live at peak viewership hours. She did not soften it. She showed the collar schematics. She explained how they worked, how they turned empathic abilities into torture. She displayed the before and after images of the Kier worlds. Thriving colonies transformed into empty slave markets. Then she showed the rescue footage. Taiyang had planted cameras that caught everything. The moment Haiyan destroyed the control node, Lyra's skin bursting into light as her collar deactivated. Hundreds of Kier running for freedom. And she showed Haiyan, a simple human cargo pilot who had looked at injustice and refused to accept it. This is not just about one species, Minji told her viewers. This is about who we are as a galactic community. Do we stand by while empires commit atrocities? Or do we have the courage to say enough? The broadcast spread like fire through dry grass. Within a day, it had reached every major world in known space. Public opinion exploded. Some supported the Valerians. They argued about sovereignty, about tradition, about the danger of younger species interfering in ancient customs. But many more were horrified. The images of the collars, the torture specifications, the footage of terrified Kier children being separated from parents were impossible to ignore. On the Valarian homeworld, Ambassador Cal held an emergency press conference. He was smooth, practiced, everything a career diplomat should be. He called the rescue an act of piracy and terrorism. He claimed the Kier were legally owned property under Valerian law. He demanded Haiyan's extradition for trial. This human committed theft and sabotage in sovereign Valerian territory, Cal declared. He must face justice. But the footage of Lyra's face when her collar deactivated, the pure relief and joy and pain mixing together, had already been seen by billions. It was hard to call that theft when what had been stolen was a person's life. Doyan presented his case to the Galactic Council 3 days later. He stood in the Grand Chamber, surrounded by representatives from hundreds of species, and argued that the Valerian Empire had violated the Sentient Rights Convention, a treaty that they themselves had signed 2 decades earlier. The convention explicitly forbids torture and forced servitude of sapient beings, Doyan stated. His voice steady despite the enormity of the moment. The evidence shows systematic torture spanning 70 years. The Valerians cannot claim ignorance. They designed these devices. They profited from this suffering. The Valerian delegation walked out in protest. But others stayed. And more importantly, others listened. On Haiyan's ship, hiding in a remote station in neutral territory, they watched the broadcast with a mix of hope and fear. The freed Kier were slowly adjusting to their new reality. Some cried constantly. Others seemed unable to believe it was real. Yuna helped organize them, found them food and clothing, donated by sympathetic station residents. Lyra stayed close to Haiyan. Her empathic connection to him, her grown stronger. She could feel his worry his determination, his lingering fear that he had made everything worse. "You did not make it worse," she told him quietly. He looked at her, startled. "Can you read my thoughts?" "No, but I can feel your emotions. And I know you are afraid you brought danger to all of us." She touched his hand. "You gave us freedom. Whatever happens next, that was worth it." Nari joined them, carrying food rations. "We have a problem." "Well, another problem. Earth's ambassador to the Galactic Council is requesting to speak with you, Hyan." "With me, specifically?" "Yes. Her name is Yuna. She wants to discuss your options." The call was arranged through heavily encrypted channels. Ambassador Yuna appeared on the screen, her expression serious. She was older, with gray threading through her dark hair and eyes that had seen too many negotiations. "Mr. Hyan," she said, "you've created quite a situation." "I know. I'm sorry if I've caused problems for Earth." "Sorry?" Yuna raised an eyebrow. "You've given us leverage we haven't had in decades. The question is what we do with it." She explained the political landscape. The Valerians were demanding his extradition. If Earth refused, it could mean sanctions, possibly military action. The Valerian Empire was powerful and had many allies, but public opinion across the galaxy was shifting. The images of the freed Kier, the evidence of systematic torture, had struck a chord. Many species were questioning their relationships with Velaris. Some were calling for intervention. "I have a choice to make," Yuna said. "I can hand you over and preserve our current treaties, or I can protect you and risk war." Hyan's throat felt tight. "I won't let Earth go to war because of me. If you need to hand me over, I understand." Yuna smiled slightly. "That's very noble. But you misunderstand. I'm not asking your permission. I'm telling you what I've decided." She leaned forward. "I'm not handing you over, and we're not going to war, because I'm going to do something better." "What?" "I'm going to put the Valerian Empire itself on trial, and you're going to help me do it." The Galactic Council called an emergency session. The Grand Chamber filled with representatives from across known space. Media from 100 worlds set up cameras. This was not just another political debate. This was history happening. And in a small cargo ship, hiding in the darkness between stars, Lyra held Hyan's hand and felt hope. Real hope. The kind that hurt, because it meant there was something to lose, but also the kind that meant there was something to fight for. The truth was spreading. And truth, once set free, was very hard to cage again. The Galactic Council chamber was built to inspire awe. Its ceiling arched hundreds of feet overhead, embedded with lights meant to represent every star system in the known galaxy. Representatives from hundreds of species sat in curved tiers, their translation devices humming softly as they converted thousands of languages into understanding. Ambassador Yuna stood at the central podium. Her simple Earth formal wear stark against the elaborate robes and environmental suits of other delegates. She had spent 3 days preparing for this moment. Now it was time. "Honored representatives," she began, her voice steady and clear. "I come before you not to defend the actions of a human citizen, but to question the actions of an empire." The Valerian delegation sat in their section, their scaled faces rigid with anger. Ambassador Cao looked ready to interrupt, but Yuna continued before he could speak. 3 weeks ago, a cargo pilot named Hyan witnessed something that disturbed him. A young female of the Kier species, enslaved and collared, displayed his property. He did what humans often do when faced with injustice. He acted. Murmurs rippled through the chamber, some approving, some disapproving. The Valerian Empire demands his extradition for theft and sabotage. They claim he stole their legal property and damaged their station. Yuna paused. "I am here to argue that you cannot steal a person. and that what he damaged was not property, but a system of torture that has operated for 70 years. She activated the holographic display. Images filled the air above the council floor. Collar schematics, medical reports, historical records of the Kier worlds before and after Valerian conquest. These collars are not simple restraints, Una continued. They cause constant pain. They force empathic beings to experience torture from both sides, victim and victimizer simultaneously. They suppress natural abilities and turn a people's greatest gift into their greatest torment. A representative from the Thalorian Assembly spoke up. Ambassador Una, are you claiming the Valerian Empire has violated the Sentient Rights Convention? I am not claiming it. I am proving it. Una gestured to Doyon, who sat in the observer section. Our legal team has documented systematic violations spanning 7 decades. Torture, forced servitude, cultural genocide, all prohibited under the convention that the Valerians signed 20 years ago. Ambassador Cal finally rose to speak. This is absurd. The Kier have been integrated into our society for generations. They are cared for, housed, fed. What the human did was criminal interference in our internal affairs. Then let us examine these internal affairs, Una replied calmly. I call my first witness. The chamber doors opened. A hush fell as Lyra entered. She walked slowly, supported by Una on one side and Hyan on the other. Her skin glowed with soft blue and silver light, her natural bioluminescence no longer suppressed. The scars on her neck where the collar had been were visible to everyone. Lyra had not wanted to do this. The thought of standing before so many beings, of being looked at and judged again, had nearly broken her. But Hyan had held her hand and told her she did not have to be strong alone. And Una had reminded her that she could speak for those who were still enslaved. So she stood at the witness podium, trembling but present. State your name, Una said gently. Lyra. Her voice was soft but clear. The translation systems carried it to every listener. Lyra, you were enslaved by the Valerian Empire. Can you tell us about your experience? For a moment, Lyra could not speak. 15 years of conditioning told her to be silent, to be nothing, to disappear. But then she felt Hyan's emotions from where he sat in the observer section. His steady support, his belief in her. I was taken when I was 5 years old, she began. Valerian ships came to my world. They said we were being integrated. They took the children first because we were easier to train. She described the collars, the constant pain, the forced broadcasting of emotions she did not feel, the punishment for any sign of individuality or resistance. Her voice shook, but she did not stop. The worst part was not the pain, she said. It was feeling the pleasure of those who hurt us. My empathic sense meant I experienced both sides. I felt my own suffering and their joy at causing it. For 15 years, that was my existence. The chamber was absolutely silent. And then a human looked at me like I was a person, Lyra continued. Not property, not a tool, a person. He risked his life to free me. And when he did, my skin remembered how to glow. I remembered what it felt like to have emotions that were just mine. She looked directly at the Valerian delegation. You took everything from my people, our worlds, our culture, our very sense of self. You made us into things. But we are not things. We never were. Ambassador Cal stood angrily. This is emotional manipulation. The girl has been coached by the humans. I cannot lie, Lyra said quietly. I am an empath. Every being in this chamber with emotional capacity can sense my sincerity. You know I speak truth. And it was true. Across the chamber, representatives who had empathic abilities or emotional sensors felt it. the absolute honesty of her testimony. She could not deceive even if she wanted to. Yuna called more witnesses. Yuna described life before the conquest. Sora, another freed Kier, showed the physical scars from years of collar use. Each testimony built on the last, creating an undeniable picture of systematic cruelty. Finally, Yuna played the footage from the rescue. The moment the collars deactivated, the explosion of light as hundreds of Kier remembered what freedom felt like. The desperate flight through the station. The Valerian guards shooting at fleeing slaves. This is what the Valerian Empire calls legal practice, Yuna said. This is what they demand we support by returning Hyan to them for punishment. She turned to face the full council. I ask you all a simple question. What kind of galaxy do we want to be? One where power determines right, or one where we hold even the mighty accountable for their cruelty? The debate that followed lasted for hours. Some species argued for Valerian sovereignty. They worried about precedent, about younger species interfering with established powers. Many of them, it became clear, had their own servant races they did not want examined too closely, but others were moved by Lyra's testimony, by the evidence, by the simple human stubbornness of a cargo pilot who had looked at evil and refused to accept it. Representative from the Calixian Union spoke passionately. We pride ourselves on being civilized. But what civilization permits this? The evidence is clear. The violation is clear. If we do nothing, we are complicit. The vote was called at midnight Galactic Standard Time. The question was simple. Did the Valerian Empire's treatment of the Kier violate the Sentient Rights Convention? The votes came in slowly. Green lights for yes, red for no. Abstentions showed as yellow. When the count finished, the result was narrow but decisive. Yes. Ambassador Cal stood in fury. This is an outrage. You have no authority over Valerian internal matters. We have the authority granted by the convention you signed, the council speaker replied. The verdict is clear. The Valerian Empire must abolish the enslavement of the Kier within one solar cycle and pay appropriate reparations. Failure to comply will result in economic sanctions and potential military intervention. You would go to war over slaves? We would go to war over the systematic torture of a sapient species, yes. The speaker's voice was firm. You have one cycle to comply. The Valerian delegation walked out, but enough remained to make the vote binding. Outside the chamber, media swarmed. Minji broadcast to the galaxy. In an unprecedented decision, the Galactic Council has ruled against one of its founding empires. The age of unchecked sovereignty may be ending. On Earth, in a small apartment, Hyan watched the broadcast with Nari and the freed Kier. When the verdict was announced, they erupted in cheers and tears. Lyra found Hyan in the chaos. She took his hand. Thank you, she said simply. I just did what anyone should do. No, most people would have looked away. You did not. She squeezed his hand. You taught me that individuals can change everything. The following months were difficult. The Valerians complied, but grudgingly. They freed the Kier and paid reparations, but their officials spread propaganda claiming human interference and council overreach. But the Kier were free. That was what mattered. Resettlement efforts began. The Galactic Council established protected worlds where the Kier could rebuild their culture. Yuna became a leader in the resettlement efforts, teaching the younger generation about their history and traditions. Sora became the first Kier representative to the Galactic Council, ensuring her people's voice would be heard. And 6 months after the rescue, Lyra traveled to Earth. Hyan met her at the landing port. She stepped off the transport ship, her skin glowing softly in Earth's sunlight. She wore simple clothes and no collar, just herself. I wanted to see your world, she said. The world that produces stubborn humans who do not know when to quit. Hyen smiled. It's just Earth. Nothing special. Everything is special now. I can feel rain without pain. I can see beauty without having to share fake emotions about it. I can just be. She looked at him seriously. I am training to be a mediator, using my empathic abilities to help others freely. Because of you. You did this yourself. I just opened a door. You did more than that. You reminded the galaxy that individuals matter, that one person's actions can change everything. They walked through the city together. Nari joined them, and Taiyang, who had come to Earth to avoid Valerian bounty hunters. They went to the ocean because Lyra had never seen one. She stood on the beach at sunrise, feeling the sand between her toes and the salt breeze on her skin. Her bioluminescence responded to the pure joy she felt, creating patterns of light that danced across her arms and faced Hyen, and Nari stood back, watching quietly. You know we started a revolution, right? Nari said softly. I know. Other species are already asking for help. Other slaves. Other injustices. I know that too. Nari looked at him. What are we going to do? Hyen watched Lyra laugh as waves touched her feet for the first time. He thought about the galaxy they lived in, the suffering that still existed, the wrongs that still needed righting. We're going to keep being stubborn, he said simply. One person at a time, one wrong at a time, until we can't anymore. Nari smiled. Stupid human idealism. It worked once. In the distance, Lyra turned and waved at them, her entire being radiating happiness. Free, truly free. And in orbit above Earth, ships from a dozen worlds arrived. They carried freed slaves from other empires, beings who had heard about the stubborn human and the girl he saved. They came seeking the same hope, the same chance at freedom. The galaxy was changing. Slowly, painfully, but genuinely changing. Because sometimes all it takes is one person who refuses to look away. One person who sees suffering and says, not on my watch. One stubborn human who keeps a promise, and one freed soul who remembers what freedom looks like and refuses to let anyone forget it.